Hey guys, as you can guess where I'm standing, the engine is out of the C3. So here's the engine, or at least the bottom end of it. We've got the top end sitting over there. So thankfully, looking at it, once we got it out of the car, we're able to inspect it better and look into the coolant passages, because if you recall from the earlier videos, we had a bit of a rust issue with this, which is ultimately what prompted me to pull the engine out anyway. Thankfully, it just needs a clean with some professional grade chemicals, so I'll have to take it to a shop to get that done because I can't do that myself. It'd be a bit dangerous and I'm not set up for it at the end of the day. So that also means that we're going to be pulling out the rotating assembly out of the engine, which isn't a big job, and I'll make another video of that when I get it done, hopefully next week or so. Thankfully it wasn't the worst possible outcome. Whether we reuse this block or not on the car remains to be seen, but if nothing else, can either be sold, say for another project, or ultimately reused on this project, so that's good. Okay, so I've narrowed it down to about 3 different main paths that we could take with the replacement engine for the C3. So the first option is likely going to be the most cheapest option and arguably probably be the most boring option. So that's going to be with the old engine block. Get that cleaned up, bored and stroked out to 338 and put it back in there with the new top end kit, aluminum heads, higher flow, bigger cam, so forth like that. Probably looking making around 450 horsepower at the crank. So a nice bump from about the old 300, low 300-ish this car used to have when I picked it up. So then the next idea after that is if I go for a crate engine, I can actually get a 454 small block from Blueprint Engines, which is actually pretty neat in my opinion, because that's pretty much it actually is a big block level of displacement from the actual small block engine. So you get the weight saving advantage of a small block with the amount of displacement that you get from a 454 big block. So that would be the next level up option that I could drop in there. Obviously it's going to be a bit more expensive, but we're probably looking at mid to high 500 horsepower, maybe I think it was about 565 from memory at the crank, so that's actually pretty awesome. And then if I really want to go for it, the big idea, or the big block idea I guess you should say, is getting a really big block Chevy in there, possibly as high as a 632, which is 10.3 litres, which would be absolutely sick and amazing, and would make north of 800 horsepower, be absolutely incredible. However, there's a few things that are going to make it a bit more expensive, obviously, aside from the engine itself, and also a little bit harder to deal with, which I'll run you through now. You know, one thing I love about having a car with the hood this long, when the engine's out, you can sit back and relax. So anyway, as I've mentioned in other videos, I have a right-hand drive C3, which is wonderful here in Australia, aside from the fact that this power steering control valve blocks access to the spark plugs and hood headers for a big block. This damn cancerous lump sits right there. I've done all the measurements. I'm a former draftsman, so I use CAD and everything, and mocked it up and digitally mocked it up, and it's literally impossible to avoid this thing, which means it has to change if I want a big block in here. Now, the only definitive way I've found to do that at the moment would be to go with rack and pinion. So on the surface, I'm really not that keen on the rack and pinion setup anyway, regardless on price. Then when looking at prices, and we were looking at over 2,000 Australian dollars, upwards of 3.5 for some kits. Now, I'm sure they're good quality and blah, blah, blah and all that, but really $2,000 to $3,000 for rack and pinion, it's a big cost, and to be honest, I'm not sure if I'm really going to go for it or not, even though I really, really want a big block in here. So that's the main hurdle at the moment. Aside from that, there's still a few other things that I want to clean up before I make my final decision on what I do with my engine. And the first one is going to be removing the rest of the old AC unit. There's like this little container, or medium-sized container thing, and then there's more tubing and wiring and so forth I'm going to cut out. I'm also going to put in a whole new brake booster and master cylinder, because I'm pretty sure those are the original ones from 40 years ago, and it's a bit hard to see in this video, but underneath there the brake booster's rusty and it's leaking brake fluid. So I've got a suspicion that it's the culprit for my weak braking power that I noticed when I picked the car up. And then if I stand up and spin around, you can see that we got some very, very light surface rust on this cross member. Nothing structural or anything like that, but I figure, hey, the engine's out. I'd be a fool not to sand that back, get it painted up, and so on. And then when we spin around here, we can also see the coolant bottle, bit old and crappy looking. So I'm going to replace that as well, and pretty much just give the engine bay a nice clean up before the engine goes back in. Make sure everything's as good as possible. Make the wires as neat as possible in here. Figure if I'm going to do this once, I'm going to do it right.